To the hundreds of terrified passengers waiting in Terminal B that morning, it looked like a nightmare coming to life. It looked like a highly trained police dog had suddenly snapped, turning into a vicious beast determined to attack a defenseless pregnant woman. People screamed, children cried, and security officers reached for their weapons. But what nobody in that airport knew, what nobody could know until it was nearly too late, was that the dog wasn't trying to hurt her. He was screaming a warning that no human could hear. And within 10 minutes, the silence that followed his barking would be broken by a truth so shocking, it would leave the entire terminal paralyzed in disbelief. But before we dive into this incredible story of instinct and survival, if you believe that dogs possess a sixth sense that we humans can only dream of, and if you want to see more stories about the heroes who walk on four legs, please take a second right now to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below saying, "I believe," if you think animals know more than they let on. Your support helps us uncover these amazing mysteries. Now, let's take you back to the moment everything changed. The day began with the kind of deceptive calm that usually precedes a storm. Denver International Airport was humming with its usual Saturday morning rhythm, a symphony of rolling suitcase wheels, the muffled announcements over the intercom, and the rich aroma of brewing coffee mixing with the sterile scent of floor wax. Officer Daniel Reyes walked his beat with the easy confidence of a man who loved his job. At his side was Scout, a magnificent 85-pound German shepherd with a coat like burnished copper and obsidian. Scout wasn't just a dog. To Daniel, he was a partner, a best friend, and the sharpest officer on the force. They had worked together for 4 years, busting drug smugglers and sniffing out explosives. Scout was famous in the precinct for his discipline. He was a dog that didn't twitch a muscle unless Daniel gave the command. He was the definition of control. That was why the events of that morning were so absolutely terrifying. As they patrolled past the busy food court near Gate B12, Daniel felt the leash go slack, then instantly pull tight. He looked down, expecting to see Scout sniffing at a discarded sandwich wrapper or looking for a head scratch. Instead, he saw a transformation that made his blood run cold. Scout had stopped dead in his tracks. His ears, usually perked and swiveling, were pinned flat against his skull. His hackles, the fur along his spine, stood up in a rigid, jagged line. A low, guttural vibration started deep in the dog's chest, traveling up the leather leash and into Daniel's hand. It wasn't a growl of aggression. It sounded like a growl of pure, primal fear. "Scout? What is it, buddy?" Daniel whispered, scanning the crowd. His hand instinctively hovered near his belt. Scout never reacted like this. Never. Then, the dog locked eyes on a target. About 20 feet away, a woman was walking toward the security checkpoint. She was undeniably beautiful, with a glow about her that turned heads. She wore a long beige trench coat that was unbuttoned, revealing a baby bump that suggested she was roughly 7 or 8 months pregnant. She carried 2 heavy shopping bags from the airport gift shops and pulled a small carry-on behind her. Her name was Monica Harris, a soft-spoken art teacher on her way home to St. Louis. She looked exhausted but happy, humming quietly to herself, completely unaware that she was the focus of a predator's gaze. Suddenly, Scout exploded. There was no warning bark, no build-up. He simply erupted into a frenzy of noise that sounded less like a dog and more like a siren. It was a sharp, piercing, repetitive bark that shattered the ambient noise of the terminal. "Scout! No! Heel!" Daniel shouted, jerking back on the lead. But it was like trying to hold back a freight train. Scout lunged, his claws scrambling frantically on the polished terrazzo floor, scraping and sliding as he fought to get to Monica. The effect on the crowd was instant and chaotic. A woman near the ticket counter screamed. A TSA agent dropped his radio. Monica looked up, her eyes going wide with sheer terror as she saw a snarling police dog straining to reach her. She dropped her bags, glass jars of jam shattering inside them, and stumbled backward, clutching her stomach protectively. "Get him away from me!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with panic. "Please! Help me! I'm trying! Stand back!" Daniel yelled, sweat instantly breaking out on his forehead. He used both hands on the harness now, planting his boots, but Scout was possessed. The dog wasn't biting, but he was making enough noise to wake the dead. He was snapping the air, foaming slightly at the mouth, his eyes wild and unblinking, fixed entirely on Monica's midsection. Travelers were backing away, forming a wide, terrified circle. Phones were out everywhere. Daniel could see the red recording lights. He knew what this looked like. It looked like an unprovoked attack. It looked like he had lost control of a dangerous weapon. "Officer, control your animal or I will shoot," a security guard from a private armored truck shouted, hand on his holster. "Do not shoot. He's not attacking." Daniel roared back, though even he wasn't sure anymore. Scout's behavior was insane. But then, Daniel noticed something. Through the chaos, through the barking, Scout wasn't trying to bite Monica's face or arms. He was lunging low. He was trying to put his nose specifically against her belly. He was whining between the barks, a high-pitched, desperate keen that sounded like crying. Monica was hyperventilating now, backed against a pillar, tears streaming down her face. "Why is he doing this? What did I do?" she sobbed. And then, the climax of the nightmare arrived. Scout managed to wrench free of Daniel's grip for a split second. The crowd gasped in unison. The dog closed the distance in 2 bounds. Monica squeezed her eyes shut and screamed, bracing for the bite. But there was no bite. Scout skidded to a halt at her feet and pressed his muzzle hard against her side. He let out one final ear-splitting bark, looking directly up at her face, and then he sat down. He sat perfectly still, trembling violently, and let out a long, low whine that broke Daniel's heart. Monica opened her eyes, confused. She looked down at the dog, then at Daniel. He didn't bite me?" "Ma'am, are you okay?" Daniel rushed forward, grabbing Scout's collar. "I am so sorry, I don't know what." He never finished the sentence. Monica's face suddenly went ashen gray. Her eyes rolled back into her head. Her hands, which had been protecting her baby, went limp. Without a sound, she collapsed forward. Daniel caught her just before she hit the ground, easing her onto the cold tiles. "Medic! I need a medic now. Code blue at gate B12, he screamed into his radio. The terminal descended into madness. "The dog scared her to death," someone shouted. "He killed her," another voice accused. But as Daniel checked for a pulse, he realized her skin was clammy and cold. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. This wasn't a faint from fear. This was something else. Scout, now silent, nudged Monica's hand with his nose, looking up at Daniel with an expression of devastating sadness. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of red bags and shouting voices. They pushed Daniel aside. As they cut away Monica's shirt to attach the defibrillator pads, the lead paramedic stopped cold. He looked at the monitor, then at Monica's stomach, then back at Daniel. "Officer," the paramedic said, his voice trembling slightly, "this woman isn't having a heart attack from fear. Her blood pressure is crashing. She's bleeding out internally." Daniel stared at him. "What?" "She's hemorrhaging," the medic yelled, moving the gurney. "We have to go now. She has minutes." As they sprinted away with the stretcher, leaving a trail of medical wrappers on the floor, Daniel stood alone in the center of the concourse. His dog sat beside him, watching the woman disappear. 2 airport security supervisors were walking toward him, their faces grim, holding a pair of handcuffs. They were coming for him. They were coming to take his badge and take Scout away. But Daniel didn't care about the badge. He looked down at Scout, who was licking a splatter of jam off the floor, unbothered. The dog had known. The dog had heard the sound of a life fading before anyone else. But as the supervisors reached him, Daniel realized something terrifying. Scout was still staring down the hallway, not at the woman, but at something, or someone, else in the crowd. And a low growl was starting in his throat again. The silence that fell over gate B12 was heavy, suffocating, and thick with unspoken accusations. The flashing red lights of the ambulance had long since disappeared into the Denver traffic, but the stain of the event remained. Travelers whispered behind their hands, casting fearful glances at the large German shepherd sitting stoically by the metal pillar. To them, Scout was a menace, a ticking time bomb that had nearly frightened a pregnant woman to death. But Daniel Reyes knew better. He stood with his back straight, his hand resting protectively on Scout's head, as his supervisor, Sergeant Miller, approached with a face like thunder. "Badge and gun, Reyes," Miller said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "You know the protocol. Unprovoked aggression toward a civilian. Especially a pregnant one. The press is going to eat us alive." Daniel didn't argue. He unclipped his holster and unpinned the silver shield from his chest, handing them over. It wasn't aggression, Sarge, Daniel said quietly, his eyes never leaving Scout's face. He wasn't attacking her. He was alerting. Miller scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. Alerting? Alerting to what? A baby? He terrorized her until she collapsed, Daniel. That's what the cameras saw. That's what the world is going to see. He didn't bite, Daniel insisted, a desperate edge creeping into his voice. He nudged her. He was whining. He smelled something wrong with her. Tell it to Internal Affairs, Miller muttered, gesturing for two other officers to take Scout's leash. No, Daniel stepped in front of the dog. I'll take him to the kennel myself. He doesn't know anyone else. If you try to drag him, he will react. Let me handle him. Miller hesitated, then nodded curtly. You have 1 hour. Then you're suspended pending the investigation results. And Reyes? Pray that woman and her baby make it. Because if they don't, it's not just your job on the line. It's everything. The walk to the police vehicle was a blur of humiliation. Daniel loaded Scout into the back of his personal truck, refusing to put him in the caged unit of a patrol car. He drove not to the precinct, but straight to the nearest veterinary emergency clinic that contracted with a canine unit, needing a neutral place to keep Scout while he figured this out. But his mind wasn't on the road, it was in that ambulance. He needed to know what had happened to Monica Harris. 2 hours later, Daniel sat in the sterile fluorescent-lit waiting room of Denver Memorial Hospital. He shouldn't have been there, he was suspended, technically a civilian now, but he couldn't stay away. He sat with his head in his hands, the image of Monica's pale face haunting him. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the passing minutes of a life potentially lost. Suddenly, the double doors swung open. A doctor in surgical scrubs, her mask pulled down around her neck, stepped out. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her blue scrubs stained with darker patches of fluid. It was Dr. Grace Miller, the head of emergency trauma. She scanned the room and her eyes landed on Daniel's uniform, which he hadn't bothered to change. "Officer," she called out. Daniel shot to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs. Did she make it? Dr. Miller walked over to him, her expression unreadable. She studied his face for a long moment before speaking. "You're the handler of the dog? The one at the airport?" Daniel braced himself for the anger. "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. He's never done anything like that before. I take full responsibility." Responsibility. Dr. Miller let out a short, incredulous breath that was almost a laugh. She shook her head, looking down at her clipboard. "Officer, do you have any idea what placental abruption is?" Daniel blinked, confused by the medical term. "No. Was that caused by the stress?" "No," Dr. Miller said firmly, her eyes locking onto his with intense seriousness. "Placental abruption is when the placenta detaches from the womb before birth. It cuts off oxygen to the baby and causes massive internal bleeding for the mother. It's silent, it's painless in the early stages, and it is almost 100% fatal if not caught immediately." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Monica Harris had a concealed abruption. She had no symptoms, no pain, no bleeding. She thought she was fine. She was minutes, literally minutes, away from going into hemorrhagic shock in that terminal. If she had gotten on that plane, the cabin pressure change would have killed her and the baby instantly. Daniel felt the room spin slightly. "I don't understand." "Your dog," Dr. Miller said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "When he was jumping on her, was he sniffing her belly?" "Yes," Daniel whispered. "He was nudging her side." "He smelled the pheromones," the doctor said, running a hand through her hair. "Or the change in her blood chemistry. I've read about it in medical journals, but I've never seen it. Dogs can smell cancer, they can smell seizures, and apparently, your dog smelled that she was dying from the inside out." Daniel leaned back against the wall, his legs feeling weak. He wasn't attacking her. "No," Dr. Miller said softly. "He was trying to tell us to stop her." The stress of his barking raised her heart rate just enough to trigger the collapse while she was still on the ground, surrounded by help. If she had walked another 50 feet to the gate, she would have collapsed on the jet bridge, and it would have been too late. "So she's alive?" Daniel asked, his voice cracking. "Both of them," Dr. Miller smiled tiredly. We performed an emergency C-section. It was touch and go, but the baby is stable in the NICU, and Monica is in recovery. She's going to be fine." Daniel let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a lifetime. Tears pricked his eyes, tears of relief, but mostly tears of overwhelming pride. Scout hadn't failed. Scout had performed a miracle. "Can I see her?" Daniel asked. Briefly, the doctor nodded. "She's waking up." Daniel walked into the recovery room like he was entering a church. Monica looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped in a rhythmic, reassuring cadence. She turned her head as he entered, her eyes groggy but clear. "Officer," she rasped, her voice weak. "I'm so sorry to disturb you," Daniel said, taking off his cap. I needed to know you were okay." Monica smiled weakly, tears filling her eyes. "The doctor told me. She told me what happened." She reached out a hand, and Daniel took it gently. "Everyone at the airport, they were screaming at you to pull him away. But he wouldn't leave me." "He's stubborn," Daniel chuckled, a tear finally escaping and rolling down his cheek. "He knew," she whispered, looking at the ceiling as if thanking God. "He knew I was dying. He saved my little girl. I want to see him. Please. I need to thank him." "I'll bring him," Daniel promised. "As soon as they let me have him back." Daniel left the hospital walking on air. He pulled his phone out to call Sergeant Miller, ready to demand his badge back, ready to tell the world that his dog was a hero. He imagined the press conference, the headlines changing from attack dog to hero hound. It was the perfect ending to a terrifying day. But as he walked toward his truck in the darkening parking garage, his phone buzzed. It wasn't the sergeant. It was a notification from the K9 training app he used to review patrol footage. Daniel frowned. He had set the app to auto-upload the bodycam footage from his chest rig whenever he docked his gear, which he had done before handing it over. Curiosity got the better of him. He sat in the driver's seat of his truck and opened the video file from that morning. He wanted to see Scout's miracle in action. He wanted to see the moment the dog sensed the danger. He watched the shaky footage, the terminal, the sun, Scout's ears perking up. He saw the moment Scout froze. He saw the growl start. But then, Daniel froze too. He hit pause. He rewound 10 seconds. He played it again. In the chaos of the moment, in the adrenaline of the attack, Daniel had been focused entirely on Monica. But the camera lens was wider than his human focus. And there, in the background, just over Monica's left shoulder, stood a man. He was wearing a gray hoodie, pulled low. He was holding a black carry-on bag. He looked unremarkable. Except for one thing. When Scout let out that first bone-chilling bark, the bark that alerted the whole terminal, Monica flinched. But the man in the hoodie didn't just flinch. He terrifiedly snapped his head toward the dog, his eyes going wide with recognition. And then, while every other person in that airport stopped to watch the drama unfold, this man did the opposite. He turned around. He didn't just walk away. He moved with a precise, predatory speed, slipping seamlessly into the crowd moving away from the security checkpoint. He kept his head down, shielding his face from the overhead cameras. And just as he disappeared from the frame of Daniel's body cam, Daniel noticed something that made the blood freeze in his veins for the second time that day. The man wasn't holding a ticket. He wasn't holding a phone. In his right hand, half hidden by his sleeve, he was clutching a small black device that looked like a remote detonator. Daniel stared at the frozen image on his phone screen, the silence of the parking garage pressing in on him. Scout hadn't just been barking at the dying woman. Scout had been barking at two things. He had sensed the death inside Monica, but he had also sensed the death walking right behind her. And that man was still out there. The glow of the phone screen illuminated Daniel's face in the dark cab of his truck, casting long shadows across his worried expression. Outside, the city of Denver was settling into the evening, oblivious to the storm brewing in the mind of one suspended police officer. On the screen, the frozen image of the man in the gray hoodie seemed to mock him. The stranger's eyes were pixelated but piercing, staring right at the camera, right at Scout, with a look of calculated terror. Daniel's thumb hovered over the call button for Sergeant Miller. His first instinct was to report it immediately. Suspect fleeing scene. Potential explosive device. But he hesitated. He was already suspended. His credibility was hanging by a thread. If he called in a bomb threat based on a grainy video and a hunch from a dog who had just attacked a pregnant woman, they wouldn't just fire him, they'd institutionalize him. He needed more. He needed proof. And he knew exactly who could help him find it. He threw the truck into gear and peeled out of the hospital parking garage, heading toward the one place he shouldn't go, the airport security operations center. He didn't have his badge, but he still had friends. Specifically, Kevin, a tech wizard who ran the night shift surveillance feeds. 30 minutes later, Daniel was sneaking through the employee entrance of the cargo bay, counting on the fact that his suspension paperwork hadn't filtered down to the gate guards yet. He found Kevin in the dimly lit control room, surrounded by a wall of monitors buzzing with the ghostly green light of night vision cameras. Reyes. Kevin spun around in his chair, nearly knocking over a can of energy drink. Man, you shouldn't be here. I heard about the suspension. Crazy stuff about the dog. The dog was right, Kevin, Daniel said, his voice urgent. The woman survived. Scout sensed a medical emergency. Kevin's eyebrows shot up. No way. Seriously. Dead serious. But that's not why I'm here. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed Kevin the paused video. I need you to track this guy. This was taken at 10:14 a.m. at Gate B12. Kevin squinted at the screen. Who is he? That's what I need to know. Look at his hand, Kevin. Tell me that doesn't look like a trigger. Kevin leaned in, adjusting his glasses. Could be a vape. Could be a phone. Or it could be a detonator, Daniel countered. Scout went crazy. Everyone thought it was the woman. But watch. Daniel hit play. They watched the man in the hoodie spin around and vanish into the crowd the moment Scout barked. He's running, Kevin. Not looking, not recording. Running. Kevin turned back to his console, his fingers flying across the keyboard. All right, let's see where you went, Mr. Hoodie. He pulled up the archived footage from the terminal cameras. For the next hour, they tracked the ghost. They watched him weave through the panicked crowd, using the distraction of Monica's collapse to slip past the TSA pre-check line unnoticed. He moved with professional efficiency, keeping to the blind spots of the cameras whenever possible. He knows the layout, Kevin muttered, impressed and unsettled. He's avoiding the high-res facial recognition zones. Where did he go? Daniel pressed. He didn't leave the airport, Kevin said, pointing to a monitor showing the exit doors. He doubled back. Look. On screen, the man ducked into a service corridor near the restrooms, a corridor marked authorized personnel only. That leads to the maintenance tunnels, Daniel said, a chill running down his spine. Under the tarmac. Why would he go down there? Kevin asked. To hide something, Daniel realized. Or to plant something. They fast-forwarded. 10 minutes later, the man emerged from a different door near the baggage claim, empty-handed. The black bag was gone. Daniel stood up, pacing the small room. He dumped the bag. It's still in the airport. If there's a bomb in the maintenance tunnels. Kevin trailed off, his face paling. That's directly under the fuel lines for Concourse B. We have to call it in, Daniel said, reaching for the desk phone. Wait, Kevin grabbed his wrist. Look at the timestamp when he comes out. 10:28 a.m. So? Daniel asked. At 10:28 a.m. this morning, Kevin whispered, typing furiously, we had a system glitch. The scanners in the East Wing rebooted. We thought it was a power surge. A localized EMP. Daniel asked, his mind racing. From the device in his hand? Maybe. Or maybe a signal jammer, Kevin said. But if he jammed the signals to open a secure door, that means he wasn't planting a bomb, Daniel. Then what was he doing? He was smuggling something through, Kevin said, pulling up a schematic of the tunnels. That corridor connects to the international cargo hold. The secure one. Where they keep high-value transport. Daniel stared at the map. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was terrifying. The man hadn't been trying to blow up the airport. He had used the chaos caused by Scout, to slip into the most secure area of the airport unseen. But Scout hadn't caused the chaos on purpose. Scout had reacted to him. Scout ruined his timing, Daniel whispered. He was supposed to use the device to glitch the cameras and slip in quietly. But when Scout started barking, he panicked. He had to abort. So the bag. Kevin started. Is the evidence, Daniel finished. And it's still down there. Just then, the door to the control room burst open. Daniel spun around, expecting security. But it was Sergeant Miller, flanked by 2 federal agents in dark suits. Reyes. Miller barked. I knew you'd be stupid enough to come back here. Sarge, listen, Daniel started. Save it, one of the agents interrupted, stepping forward. He was tall, with eyes like flint. We've been monitoring your search history on the internal server, Kevin. You're looking at classified footage of a federal suspect. Daniel stepped in front of Kevin. He's helping me. We found him. The guy in the hoodie. He left a bag in the maintenance tunnels. The room went silent. The 2 agents exchanged a glance. You found the bag? The agent asked, his voice dropping an octave. We know where he went, Daniel corrected. And we know he used a jammer to bypass the locks. My dog knew he was there. The agent stared at Daniel for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket. Daniel tensed, expecting handcuffs. Instead, the agent pulled out a photo. It was a surveillance shot of the man in the gray hoodie. His name is Julian Vane, the agent said. He's an international arms dealer. We've been tracking him for 6 months. We lost him this morning in the terminal. We thought he'd made the flight. He didn't, Daniel said. He's still in the city. And his package is under the floorboards. Show us, the agent commanded. The next hour was a blur of tactical gear and bomb squad protocols. Daniel was allowed to accompany the team, mostly because he was the only one who knew exactly which door Vane had used. They descended into the concrete belly of the airport, the air thick with dust and the hum of machinery. They found the black bag shoved behind a ventilation unit. It wasn't a bomb. Inside, wrapped in anti-static foam, were prototype microchips stolen from a defense contractor. Tech worth millions, tech that could bring down planes if it fell into the wrong hands. He was handing it off, the agent murmured, examining the chips. He stashed it for a buyer to pick up later. Sergeant Miller looked at Daniel, then at the bag, then shook his head. Your dog, Reyes. He sniffed out a placental abruption and an international smuggler in the span of 30 seconds. He's a good dog, Daniel said, a small tired smile touching his lips. He's a national hero, the agent corrected. If these chips had left the country, we don't even want to think about it. Daniel felt a wave of vindication wash over him. He had his badge back. He had his dignity back. And Scout. Scout was going to be a legend. But as they walked back up to the surface, the agent's phone rang. He listened for a moment, his face hardening. He hung up and looked at Daniel with grim urgency. What is it? Daniel asked. We got a ping on Vane's phone, the agent said. He didn't leave the city. He's at the hospital. Daniel's blood turned to ice. The hospital? Why? He's looking for the loose end, the agent said, checking his weapon. He saw you with the dog. He saw the camera footage on the news. He knows the dog alerted to him. And he knows the woman is the only witness who was close enough to see his face when he turned around. Monica, Daniel breathed. He's going to silence the witness, the agent said, breaking into a run. We have to get to Denver Memorial. Now. Daniel didn't wait for the tactical team. He sprinted for his truck, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Monica and her baby were defenseless in a recovery room. Scout was locked in a kennel miles away. And a desperate, dangerous man was walking the halls of the hospital, hunting for the woman who had survived one miracle only to land in the crosshairs of a killer. Daniel floored the gas pedal, tires screeching as he tore out of the airport. He prayed he wasn't too late. But as he wove through traffic, a terrifying thought gripped him. Vane wasn't just a smuggler. He was a cleaner. And cleaners didn't leave messes behind. In the hospital room, Monica Harris was sleeping peacefully, her newborn daughter in a bassinet beside her. The door to her room creaked open slowly. A figure in a nurse's scrub cap and mask slipped inside, closing the door silently behind him. He reached into his pocket, his eyes cold and dead as he approached the bed. But then from the hallway, came a sound that made the killer freeze. A sound that Daniel recognized instantly, even over the siren of his own truck. A bark. Not a normal bark. The bark of a dog that had broken out of a cage. The bark of a guardian who would tear through steel to protect his pack. Scout was coming. And he wasn't happy. The speedometer of Daniel's truck pushed 90 as he weaved through the late-night traffic of I-70. Sirens wailed in the distance behind him, the federal agents and the SWAT team trying to catch up, but Daniel knew they were too slow. Every second that ticked by was a second Julian Vane had to find Monica's room. Come on, Daniel muttered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He grabbed his phone and dialed the vet clinic where he had left Scout. Emergency veterinary clinic, this is Sarah, a voice answered. Sarah, it's Officer Reyes, Daniel shouted over the roar of the engine. Is my dog there? Is Scout secure? There was a pause, and then a shaky breath. Officer Reyes. I was just calling the police. He broke out. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, he broke out? He went crazy about 20 minutes ago, Sarah stammered. He chewed through the heavy gauge wire of the kennel door. He threw himself through the reception window. He's gone. He just ran. Which way? Daniel demanded. West, she said. Toward the city center. Toward the hospital district. Daniel dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. It was impossible. The clinic was 3 miles from the hospital. There was no way a dog could navigate that distance through city traffic, at night, to a specific building he had never been to. It defied every law of animal behavior. But Scout wasn't just an animal. Daniel slammed on the brakes as he screeched into the hospital's ambulance bay, abandoning the truck right in the no parking zone. He drew his service weapon, he had reclaimed it from Miller's desk before leaving, and sprinted toward the entrance. Security, he yelled, flashing his badge to the bewildered guard at the desk. Lock down the 4th floor. Maternity ward. Now. Sir, you can't just, the guard started. Do it. Daniel roared, vaulting the turnstile. There is an armed suspect in the building. He hit the stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time. His lungs burned, but his mind was focused on one thing, Monica. Vane knew she had seen him. Vane knew she could identify him. On the 4th floor, the hallway was quiet. Too quiet. The nurse's station was empty. Daniel moved tactically, weapon raised, checking corners. He reached room 412, Monica's room. The door was slightly ajar. Daniel kicked it open, sweeping the room with his gun. Police. Drop it. But the room was empty. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled. The bassinet was overturned. Monica. Daniel yelled, checking the bathroom. Nothing. Panic clawed at his chest. Had Vane already taken her? Then he heard it. A scuffle. A muffled scream. Coming from down the hall, near the freight elevators. Daniel sprinted toward the sound. He rounded the corner and saw them. Julian Vane, dressed in stolen scrubs, had Monica in a headlock, dragging her backward toward the open doors of the service elevator. He had a gun pressed to her temple. Monica was sobbing, clutching her newborn baby to her chest with one arm, fighting weakly against Vane's grip. Let her go. Daniel shouted, leveling his weapon. Vane spun Monica around, using her as a human shield. His eyes were wild, desperate. Back off, he screamed. I'll kill them both. I swear to God. You don't have anywhere to go, Julian, Daniel said, stepping forward slowly, keeping his aim steady. The building is surrounded. Put the gun down. I'm walking out of here, Vane spat. And she's coming with me. She's my ticket. Please, Monica begged, tears streaming down her face. Please, my baby. Shut up. Vane jammed the gun harder against her head. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. He had no shot. Vane was too well covered. If he missed, he'd hit Monica or the baby. He was helpless. And then, the stairwell door at the end of the hall exploded open. It wasn't a human who burst through. It was a blur of black and tan muscle, moving faster than thought. Scout. He was bleeding from cuts on his muzzle and paws, wounds from the glass window he had shattered to escape. His chest was heaving, covered in sweat and road grime. but his eyes were locked on Vane with a focus that was terrifying to behold. Vane saw the dog and flinched. "Get that thing away from me." "Scout!" Daniel yelled, terrified Vane would shoot the dog. But Scout didn't attack blindly. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He dropped low, slinking forward like a wolf stalking prey, his eyes never leaving the gun in Vane's hand. "Shoot the dog and I drop you," Daniel warned, stepping closer. "It's over, Vane." Vane panicked. He shifted his aim from Monica to the approaching dog. "No!" Daniel shouted. In that split second of distraction, Monica stomped her heel down onto Vane's instep with all the strength she had left. Vane howled in pain and stumbled back a step. It was all the opening Scout needed. With a roar that shook the walls, Scout launched himself into the air. He cleared 10 feet in a single bound, a missile of fur and teeth. Bang! Vane fired. Scout yelped mid-air, his body twisting violently, but his momentum carried him forward. His jaws clamped onto Vane's gun arm with the force of a hydraulic press. Vane screamed as the bones in his wrist crunched. The gun clattered to the floor. Scout didn't let go. He dragged Vane to the ground, shaking him like a rag doll, keeping himself positioned between the killer and the mother. Daniel rushed forward, kicking the gun away and diving onto Vane. "Monica, get back!" He pinned Vane to the linoleum, cuffing his hands behind his back while the man screamed in agony. "Get him off me! Get him off!" "Scout out!" Daniel commanded, his voice breaking. Scout released the arm instantly. But he didn't stand up. He collapsed onto his side, panting heavily. Daniel finished securing Vane and shoved him toward the arriving security guards. Then he fell to his knees beside his dog. "Scout? Buddy." There was blood pooling on the white tiles. Bright red arterial blood. Scout looked up at Daniel, his tail giving a weak, thumping wag against the floor. He tried to lift his head, but it was too heavy. The bullet had hit him in the shoulder, high up near the chest. "No, no, no," Daniel whispered, pressing his hands over the wound to staunch the flow. "Stay with me, buddy. You're okay. You're a good boy." Monica crawled over, clutching her baby, weeping openly. "He saved us," she sobbed. "He came back for us. He needs a vet." Daniel screamed at the gathering crowd of doctors and nurses. "Someone help him." "We treat humans, officer," a resident stammered, looking horrified. "He's an officer." Daniel roared, tears blinding him. "He is my partner. Treat him or I swear I will burn this place down." Dr. Grace Miller pushed through the crowd. "Get a gurney," she ordered. "I don't care about the protocols. Get him into Trauma 1. Now." They lifted the heavy dog onto the stretcher. Scout groaned, his eyes rolling back. He looked at Daniel one last time, a look of pure, unwavering trust, before his head lolled to the side. "Don't you die on me," Daniel whispered into Scout's ear as they ran down the hall. "You hear me? That's an order, soldier. Do not die." They burst into the trauma room. The doors swung shut, leaving Daniel and Monica standing in the hallway, covered in the blood of the hero who had saved them both. Hours passed. The hospital hallway was silent again. Vane was in federal custody. The news crews were camped outside. But Daniel sat on the floor outside the operating room, his head resting on his knees, staring at the dried blood on his hands. Monica sat in a wheelchair beside him, rocking her sleeping daughter. Neither of them spoke. There were no words for this. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Miller stepped out. She had changed her scrubs again. She looked exhausted, defeated. She pulled her surgical cap off and sighed. Daniel stood up slowly, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Doc." Dr. Miller looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice caught. She shook her head slowly. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she whispered. "The bullet nicked the artery. We tried everything. He lost too much blood." Daniel felt his knees give way. He slid down the wall, a guttural sound of grief tearing from his throat. It wasn't possible. After everything, after the airport, the bomb scare, the escape, the hospital rescue, Scout couldn't be gone. Heroes weren't supposed to die. Monica let out a sob, burying her face in her baby's blanket. "Can I Daniel choked out. "Can I see him?" "Of course," Dr. Miller said softly, stepping aside. Daniel walked into the room. Scout lay on the metal table, covered in a white sheet. He looked peaceful, like he was just sleeping after a long shift. Daniel walked over and rested his forehead against the dog's cold nose, weeping uncontrollably. "You were the best boy," he whispered. "The very best." He reached for Scout's collar, intending to take it as a keepsake. His fingers brushed against the silver tags. And then he felt it. A twitch. Daniel froze. He pulled back. He stared at the dog's chest. Nothing. "I'm losing my mind," he muttered, wiping his eyes. But then it happened again. A tiny, almost imperceptible shudder of the sheet. Daniel grabbed his stethoscope from the counter. He didn't even know why it was there, and jammed the earpieces into his ears. He pressed the bell against Scout's chest, holding his breath. Silence. Silence. Thump. Daniel's eyes widened. Thump. It was faint. It was erratic. But it was there. "Doc." Daniel screamed, spinning around. "He's not dead. Get in here." Dr. Miller rushed back in. "Daniel, he flatlined 5 minutes ago." "Listen." Daniel yelled, shoving the stethoscope at her. She listened. Her eyes went wide. "Code Blue," she shouted to the nurses. "Get the epinephrine. He's fighting. Start compressions." The room exploded into chaos again. Daniel was pushed back into the hallway as the team went to work, fighting to pull Scout back from the brink. Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, his hands clasped in prayer. He watched the reflection of the frantic activity in the glass. And as he watched, he saw something strange. Down on the street below, amidst the flashing lights of the police cars and news vans, a solitary figure was standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the hospital window. It wasn't a cop. It wasn't a reporter. It was a man in a long trench coat. He was standing perfectly still, staring right at Daniel. And in his hand, he held a leash. An empty leash. Daniel squinted. The man raised a hand in a slow, deliberate salute. Then he turned and walked away, vanishing into the shadows of an alleyway. Daniel turned back to the room as the heart monitor suddenly let out a steady rhythmic beep. Beep, beep, beep. "We got him." Dr. Miller cheered. "He's back." Daniel slumped against the glass, laughing and crying at the same time. Scout was alive. It was a miracle. But as the relief washed over him, the image of the man on the street burned in his mind. Who was he? Why did he have an empty leash? And why did Daniel get the sinking feeling that Scout's story wasn't over, that the dog hadn't just been protecting them from Vane, but was part of something much, much bigger? The heart monitor beeped steadily, counting out the seconds of a second chance. But out in the dark, the man with the empty leash was waiting. And the mystery of Scout was only just beginning. The steady rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the most beautiful sound Daniel Reyes had ever heard. It was a drumbeat of defiance, a signal that Scout, the dog who had defied protocols, broken out of cages, and taken a bullet to save a life, was refusing to give up. 3 weeks had passed since that terrifying night at Denver Memorial Hospital. The snow was beginning to fall in the city, dusting the streets in white, covering the scars of the chaos that had unfolded. In a quiet recovery suite on the first floor of the veterinary hospital, Daniel sat in a plastic chair, reading a book he wasn't really absorbing. In the large kennel run in front of him, lying on a plush orthopedic bed funded by donations from strangers all over the world, was Scout. The German Shepherd was thinner, and a large patch of his beautiful black and tan fur had been shaved away on his shoulder to make room for the neat line of stitches. He moved stiffly, favoring his left leg, but his eyes, those intelligent amber eyes, were bright and alert. "Hey buddy," Daniel whispered, tossing a piece of dried liver onto the bed. Scout snapped it out of the air with a speed that made Daniel smile. He was healing. He was coming back. The door to the room opened, and a familiar face walked in. Monica Harris looked different than the terrified woman in the airport terminal. She looked tired. New motherhood would do that, but there was a strength in her posture that hadn't been there before. And in her arms, wrapped in a soft pink blanket, was a tiny bundle. "We were in the neighborhood for a checkup," Monica said softly. "We couldn't leave without saying hi." Daniel stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Monica." It's good to see you. How is she? She's perfect, Monica smiled, looking down at her daughter. She sleeps through the night. Mostly. She walked over to the kennel bars. Scout, who had been resting his chin on his paws, lifted his head. His ears perked up. He let out a soft, inquisitive woof. Can I? Monica asked. Daniel nodded. He's gentle. He remembers. Monica opened the kennel door slowly and knelt on the floor. Scout didn't jump. He didn't bark. He dragged himself off the bed and limped over to her. He sniffed her knee, then her hand, his tail giving a slow rhythmic thump-thump-thump against the floor. Then, very gently, he stretched his neck out and sniffed the pink blanket. The baby shifted, letting out a small coo. Scout froze. He leaned in closer, his wet nose barely brushing the infant's tiny hand. He let out a long, contented sigh and rested his heavy head on Monica's thigh, right beside the baby. Monica began to cry, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered into his fur. "Thank you for giving her a chance to live." Daniel watched them, a lump in his throat. This was it. This was the reason they did the job. Not for the drug busts, not for the glory, but for moments like this. "What did you name her?" Daniel asked, his voice thick with emotion. Monica looked up, smiling through her tears. She pulled the blanket back slightly to reveal a small, silver charm pinned to the baby's onesie. It was a paw print. "Her middle name is Scout," she said. "Hope Scout Harris." Daniel laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. That's a lot of pressure for a kid. She's gonna have to be pretty brave." "She already is," Monica said. "She's a survivor. Just like him." The story of the airport miracle dog had gone global. Daniel had done interviews with every major network. There were talks of a book deal, a movie, even a statue in the terminal. The federal government had officially cleared Daniel of all charges and reinstated him with a commendation for bravery. Julian Vane was awaiting trial in a supermax prison, his smuggling ring dismantled thanks to the evidence Scout had uncovered. It was a perfect ending. A fairy tale wrapped in police tape. But as Monica left that afternoon, promising to visit again, Daniel felt a familiar itch of unease. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small object that had been delivered to the precinct that morning. It wasn't a fan letter. It wasn't a donation. It was a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note. Daniel sat back down in the chair, Scout resting his head on his knee, and looked at the photo. It was a grainy black and white surveillance shot taken from a street camera outside the hospital on the night of the shooting. It showed the man Daniel had seen from the window, the man in the trench coat with the empty leash. But in the photo, the man wasn't looking at the hospital. He was looking at the camera. And he was smiling. A cold, knowing smile. Daniel turned the photo over. The note on the back was written in elegant, cursive script. "He is not just a dog, Officer Reyes. He is a catalyst. You have seen what he can do when he senses danger. But do you know what he can do when he senses potential? Keep him close. The test is not over. It has only just begun." There was no signature. Just a symbol drawn at the bottom. A circle with a line through it. The symbol for a silenced dog whistle. Daniel stared at the note, his blood running cold. The test is not over. Who was this man? How did he know about Scout? And what did he mean by catalyst? Scout nudged Daniel's hand, bringing him back to the present. The dog looked up at him, his eyes deep and soulful. For a moment, Daniel wondered if Scout knew. If he understood that his actions at the airport were just the first ripple in a much larger pond. "What are you not telling me, buddy?" Daniel whispered, scratching behind Scout's ears. Scout didn't answer. He just licked Daniel's hand and settled back down to sleep, the silver paw print tag on his collar glinting under the fluorescent lights. Daniel put the note back in his pocket. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. The world saw a hero dog who had saved a pregnant woman. They saw a heartwarming story of instinct and survival. But Daniel knew the truth. He knew that the bark in the terminal hadn't just been a warning about a medical emergency or a smuggler. It had been a signal. A call to arms. Scout had opened a door that couldn't be closed. And whatever was walking through that door, they would face it together. Because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they wear collars. And sometimes, the things they save us from are the things we never even saw coming. So the next time your dog barks at nothing in the dark, or growls at a stranger you think is safe, listen to them. Trust them. Because they might just be seeing the one thing that can save your life. This story of Scout and Monica may be over, but the legend of the dog who sees the unseen is just beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Thank you for watching this incredible journey. If Scout's bravery touched your heart, please give this video a big thumbs up and share it with every animal lover you know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because we have a feeling that Officer Reyes and Scout will be back very soon, and you need to be here when the mystery unfolds. Until next time, hug your pets a little tighter, and remember, sometimes, the greatest miracles have 4 paws and a wet nose. Stay safe, everyone.